Okay, so let's talk advanced nervous system somatic healing work and what this looks like versus what most practices, modalities are teaching out there. So you already know from your initiation one addendum all of the kind of the different nervous system states. You understand how we support ourselves and others to regulate our nervous system, how we build that capacity. So you've got those tools, you understand resources as that bottom layer. So how do we support another person to find that sense of goodness within them? We build their resources first, okay? Then we look at different nervous system tools, breathing techniques to help the body go into more of a parasympathetic state, orienting, containment, pendulation, that's touching in and out of the stimulus, titration, little, right? Little and often, right? Less is more. So you've done all of this. You understand from the initiation two workbooks when we're looking at awareness, how we start to bring in these tools and to build that capacity and to help yourself and your clients to create that felt sense of safety in their bodies, even when the focus is not on somatic and body work. You learn in initiation three about how the inner counsel comes into play, the protective parts, the inner child, the shadow, but also the somatic nervous system body elements of that. And again, how we weave all of that in. So as we move into initiation four, you already have this incredible framework of supporting people with their nervous systems. Now, what you have learned so far is where most trainings will stop. Okay, so people learn how to regulate, how to feel calm, how to back off of an uncomfortable sensation. Now, in order to heal a pattern, really create behavioral change, heal trauma, heal survival patterns in the body, what is required is actually a completely different approach because we want to get a person to a place where they have that capacity within their nervous system to actually stay with the sensation and allow it to complete. So you're going to find all of this written down below, but this really felt like one where I wanted to do a video. So if we think about the the steps that create trauma in our bodies or stress or overwhelm, like whichever language you prefer, it's really all the same thing. Um, you have an event. So something happens and that creates a reaction in the body, a startle response. And this is when we would very naturally go into that sympathetic, the fight flight response. Okay. Now, if there is a lack of resources or a perceived lack of resources in the system, the body is like, I can't deal with this threat. I can't deal with this threat. And the natural action that the body would take, which in kind of nervous system language is the active response, that natural reaction that it would take, maybe to run away, to fight, to shout, whatever it would be, okay, that response gets thwarted. Okay, so that active response is thwarted. And so then all of the energy that came to allow the body to mobilize to take that response is what becomes these stuck somatic patterns within the body that then show up in behaviors like people pleasing, perfectionism, overgiving, overworking. And in order to complete the stress cycle, what actually needs to happen is the client or you need to be able to make contact with and stay with the active response that was not taken at the time. And to do so without re traumatizing or overwhelming your nervous system, which is why we are doing this work here. If you try and do this work with someone who does not have the resources, does not have a sufficiently wide window of tolerance, you very quickly overwhelm their system. They become re-traumatized and they go into that shutdown freeze state, and you've actually ended up doing more harm than good. And this is why I always caution against powerful, like conscious connected breath work where it's mouth breathing, because that can almost facilitate the body going into these things when it isn't necessarily resourced and ready for it. Now, we will do loads and loads of work in our live classes. You'll find more in the workbook below about like how do we actually know when a client is ready for this stuff. But I just wanted to really outline at the top that in the back of your mind, when you are working with someone and you're trying to facilitate embodied transformation and actual behavioural change, you're always thinking about where is their nervous system stuck? What was the active response that they couldn't take? Okay. And you'll get clues, right? You'll get clues if they're like avoidant, they don't do things, and maybe their system is stuck in flight. Maybe they are kind of more aggressive. They're pushing through. I need to do this. It doesn't matter. Rest is for the weak. Then maybe their system is stuck in fight, in those sympathetic responses. But ultimately, we are trying to get that system into a place where whatever it was at the time that they could not do, that their system can then complete. Now, the reason that this is advanced is because there's a reason why the thing was too intense before and it overwhelmed them and they couldn't feel it. Okay. So they have to feel that hurt fresh in order to complete the cycle. And that's actually quite a lot on the body. Also, most practitioners avoid this work and don't go there because they haven't done the work themselves. And also, they then don't have the capacity to hold that process for their client. I want to give an example. Okay, so say for example, as a child, I'll give a personal example. So as a child, I had an experience where I had swore and had my mouth and was pinned down and had my mouth washed out with soap. Right now, obviously there was an active response because I told the person to fuck off prior to the mouth being washed out with soap, right? So there was this activation, there was this response, but then in that process of being pinned down, the whole experience was too terrifying for me to then fight back, push myself off. And also, I didn't have the actual resources because the person doing it was a lot bigger and a lot stronger than me. Okay. So there was a perceived like there wasn't enough resource in my system to do it. So that got pushed down. Okay. And so in order to get me back to balance, right, to resolve that pattern in my system, which then created lots of behavioral patterns around don't challenge, don't speak your truth, don't answer back, be good, behave yourself. All of these different things that then, created so many different behaviors and choices as an adult. I had to be able to feel the terror of that experience and then make contact with what my body would have wanted to do at the time. And then in feeling that terror, taking that action and allowing my body to do what it very naturally wants to do, I was able to complete the cycle around that particular behavior. Now, many people have many different cycles, so we don't just do this once and then it's done. This might be a process that happens several times over the course of you working with people. But building that capacity, and it also might not happen just in one session, building that capacity for the person to be able to stay with the sensations, because in the previous nervous system work is about, okay, well, how do we get them to gently touch in and out of it? And like, can we facilitate a place where maybe the sensation starts as an 8 and then we move it down to a 6 and then we move it down to a 4 so it dissipates? To complete the stress cycle, we will be inviting the client to stay. with the sensation, to allow the intensity of the sensation. So instead of orienting to pleasure, we're teaching them to orient to threat and to be with the threat. And we'll do some stuff on orient to threat. Don't worry. Okay. Because it's when we can complete these cycles and move through these pieces that the body can go back into balance. We can re-access our life force energy, that life force energy that got stuck in our body in the process of that thwarted movement that then goes into freeze. Because every single time there is an uncompleted stress cycle, a traumatic event, something that is overwhelming, there is always, always a component of freeze in the system. Now, we've talked about this before, but most high performers will override that freeze response. So they will push themselves artificially up into that sympathetic to push through, to override. But then they are constantly having to deal with the overwhelm of this. And this is another reason why we want to do that work first before we're then trying to go out there and do the big things. If you have a huge freeze response and an issue and a challenge around being visible, and you try and force yourself to be visible, right, you may be able to push through and force yourself to be visible. But if you do not already have the resources, the felt sense of safety, the kind of that flexibility in your nervous system to move between the different states without getting stuck, if you then try to force and push yourself into a behavior that is overwhelming for your system, you are going to pay the price for that. And so that is when you maybe have a vulnerability hangover for days after you post something, or you post something and you have so much activation in your system. Now, some activation is fine. And this is then that nuance because, we do something new, it's unusual, we're going to feel that discomfort. So we might go into that stress response, but can we go into that stress response, feel the sensations, allow the body to do what it wants to do, and then come back into equilibrium? And the challenge for your clients is most of your clients are going to be pushers. They are going to be very conditioned and very used to overriding. They're going to want to do this process quickly. They're going to be frustrated. They may not want to spend the time it takes to build the resources, the felt sense of safety, the capacity. They may not want to spend time doing orienting and containment and titration and pendulation in order to get to this place. And they also may have protective parts, part of that inner council, are like, it's not safe for us to go there and feel this, right? So, this is why having this skill and being able to hold clients through this skill is exceptionally rare because a practitioner that hasn't done this work is not going to be able to do this work effectively with clients. And most practitioners have not done this work. It's then also for you as a practitioner, can you stay with that discomfort of the client trying to push things forward and move and rush, and you continually supporting them to slow down? Because the magic of all of this is by initiation four, this shit happens naturally, right? If they've learned to slow down, they've connected into their body, they've got that felt sense of safety, there's very little that you actually have to do other than holding a beautiful, safe space with presence to allow them to complete that stress response because it will come up naturally when their body is ready and resourced for it. So that's kind of an overview. You'll have all the information that you need in the addendum below, but I just want you to have that in the top of your mind as you're going through this work and we start to practice in the sessions and then you're doing this work with clients, is to think about what is that active response that was thwarted and how do I support myself, this person in front of me, to get back to that active response in a way that is not overwhelming or re-traumatizing. So don't be overwhelmed by this. It's a beautiful, beautiful practice. It will make you highly sought after. It's highly skilled work. But also, because you are doing the work yourself throughout this certification, because of the materials in the workbooks and what we are doing in classes, you will then have the capacity to do this for other people, and it is the most rewarding work. The last thing that I just want to say on this is sometimes people think that completion of the stress response has to be some like great big dramatic event. So like floods of tears or screaming or shaking. And sometimes it will be. But also sometimes it could just be a sigh. It could be a tear. I've had one before where my impulse in my body was just to curl myself right up. And as I curled myself right up, my coach thought that that was me completing the cycle and going into that collapse. But as I moved down, I felt the life force back into my body, and the impulse was actually to come back up and fight. Right. And so that was me completing the cycle. So it wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was just a movement down and then a movement back up. And in that movement back up, it was like I reconnected with my life force and my power. So cannot wait to dive in more. As ever, any questions, let me know. But this really felt like one that I wanted to start with a video. Ciao for now.